the Thunder are tough, but they don't want to see the Lakers in the playoffs. It's easy and visible to see that the Lakers have their number, and that is something I did not see as even a possibility like a week or two ago. That's the craziest thing. I thought OKC was such a dominant team, and because of their size, athleticism, the number one defense in the league by not even by a sizable margin, I thought they would run through a team like the Lakers, being with the deficiencies that the Lakers have. For a team like OKC who has the perimeter defenders that they have, it's just so surprising, man. And you have Shai Gilgeous after the game. He's talking with the reporter, and he's saying, "Oh yeah, after the last game we got stumped, and we knew that we had to come into this game and really want it, take it, and because we're not the type of team that's going to lose, back-to-back games and all this stuff." And again, man, without the Luka ejection. And even after the Luka ejection, they had Vanderbilt had a technical foul right on the play ensuing that. And then you had another extra penalty shot that OKC took. The game just got really weird in LeBron's voice. And LeBron, that's what he said after the game, after the Luka ejection. The game just got weird. And without that, man, without the game getting weird, the OKC is losing that game. And again, you look at this young team who has had, a successful regular season in the past, and of course, as a really young team, they lost in the playoffs. Then you come back this year, number one team in the West by far, and if they go out early, man, I'm talking about first or second round, I know you're more towards on the side of, hey, you want to keep this together, but I think there will be a move that needs to be made. Now, the last thing I'll say on that is Kenyon Martin said something very interesting, and he said that if you really look at it, you can look at it from the lens of, yes, OKC was a dominant regular season team this year, but is that the same as in years past? Can any team just rely on their regular season success and be deemed as a successful team? Because in this era, man, you just got a lot of guys sitting out a lot of games, and if you're a team who is pretty much playing everyone and you have some level of decency about you, you're going to beat the teams that are without their stars.
Yeah, there's some soft wins over the 82 games with the amount of teams that sit people and various situations. So I don't disagree with that point, but I do feel 2 points. The post-game comments by Shai, he's smart enough to know that game got weird after the ejection. And I feel that part of what he's doing is kind of almost like trying to speak confidence into himself and his team, almost to rule out that the Lakers might have a little something for them that they're not comfortable with. And then I generally, and I know I did pick OKC to win the title, and I'm not going to back off of that.
I picked them to come out the West.
But I generally feel that, particularly in basketball, there's usually like a playoff progression that most of these teams go through, where they kind of make some runs, get into deep runs, build some toughness through scars of defeat, and finally break through. And there's always a feeling that until a team does break through, that they're somehow flawed and can't. And I think like the Celtics were that. They'd been in the playoffs and made runs and been to a finals and hadn't gotten a win in that setting until last year. And there's always a lingering question until they actually did it is, can Brown and Tatum lead a team to a championship? And until they did it, it is what it is. I think Denver falls into that category as well. They had not been a great playoff team until they made their run and won the title.
Here goes the difference with that, though.
Go ahead.
People were talking about splitting, Brown and Tatum up as the move to make.
Yeah.
I want to make this. I'm not saying like trade Shai Gilgeous and try to, I'm not saying trade Chet Holmgren. I'm not saying like anything, nuts like that.
Right.
But I am saying make a significant move on the perimeter, right? Just one move, because what they do need is a second reliable go-to scorer. Now Jalen is growing, and he very well can grow into that. But who knows when? He's so young, and who knows when, and who knows if. And he's not at that level that Tatum or Brown was at, that Jokic or Murray was at. Like before they actually won, we're talking about a guy, Murray, was having 50-point playoff games. We're talking about guys and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown who were all-stars, who were all NBA type performers and things like that. Like this, Jaylen is none of the above. And so I'm saying you move on from a guy like Jaylen or Lou Dort, guys who have a lot of stock in the NBA. Like people will make a move for those guys, and you can get a reliable scorer on the wing. That's my only point.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't getting yet to the point of moving guys. I was just saying like this is a relatively young team. They haven't accomplished very much in the playoffs, and until they do, there's always going to be a skepticism, even with the great regular season record. And I think that's where Martin's coming from, is that hey, they still got to show us in the playoffs when everything's at its peak. Now to the issue that you kind of addressed is like if they fall short. I don't know that the impetus is all that different whether like they were to fail in the first round or get to the final and fail, because either way, like it raises questions, and either way you can feel for slightly different reasons you need more, you need something different. Now, obviously, if you get knocked out early, the narrative is going to be like probably that you're soft or lack experience to win in the playoffs, and that's why you're out in round one. If you get to the final and lose there, or the conference final and lose there, usually the journey of the playoffs will expose some frailty about your roster, that you need to fill. And I would actually say making a longer run in the playoffs probably reveals more about what your actual shortcoming is than getting knocked out early. You might be able to see like, hey, we just don't have enough shooting to win, these final two series, or we may not have enough, whatever that element is, or too many one-dimensional guys. And then you're going to have a more specific data to realize what it is that you might need that can change the corner. And I'm also big on this, though, too. It's like I like to see players develop and grow and improve. But, it is true. The Thunder have an MVP or MVP candidate, and they have a bunch of good sub-all-star players. And the interesting thing with Jaylen and with Chet, like, how close are they to being the best version of themselves? Do they, like, theoretically they could get better, but do they? Does one or both of those guys kind of really take a leap, maybe offensively, to become that second scoring option? Or do they just kind of tap out at kind of something close to what they are as scoring options? And the way you look at this team, because they have Shea as the one main scoring option, there is a job to be had as that number two offensive guy. And whether Jaylen fills it or Chet fills it, or they feel that they need to go outside and fill it, that's a job that's open. Some people on certain teams and situations, you're kind of boxed into what you are. Maybe it's third option. You're not touching it. Like Austin Reeves for the Lakers. He ain't going to be option one or two, during this iteration of the Lakers. But the Thunder aren't that way yet. You have Shea, but that second spot, if one of those guys were to take a significant leap offensively as an elite scorer, it's there for the taking. But if you're not able to take it, they're going to have to reassess and look at other options.
Yeah, but how long do you roll that cord out for? How long do you keep coming back?
When I look at it that way, like I really, I do think you could be onto something in that depending on the nature of the failure in the playoffs, assuming they fail, maybe you do something like why sit, But I do, it's a tough decision.
Because in my opinion, I think when you look at team building, I really think it's two different things there. Because if you have a young team, like, whatever, Orlando Magic, teams that are young, Atlanta Hawks, things like that, but you can keep whatever, running it back, or what have you, because you have a young team and there's whatever, maybe a mid, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth seed, ninth seed, or whatever. You look and see if these guys can grow and get better. But when you have a championship team with an MVP, I think MVP or MVP candidate, I think you owe it to your organization and your fans to go for it at that time and not wait for the young guys to develop. Because, see, they have championship role players, okay? They have an MVP, okay, in a great system. Now is the time to go out and complete this and go for it. Because I think you're kind of fooling yourself here. Now, again, that's if all fails this year. I picked OKC with knowing this was an issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, I think it's a really, in reality, it's a very weird time to have this conversation, because
it is.
If they win the title and there's
then it's
nothing,
like whatever.
We figured it out.
Yeah.
But we're almost assuming they fail and come up short. And,
because
so that's the thing.
Because I don't like what I see. And then go ahead. You had something to say.
Two quick points. The one thing, like, again, I do think you do need to balance, like, being open to change, because we don't know what the opportunity is. You get to the offseason, you don't know 100% what a player is going to be available to you. We could bounce names around and whatever, but we do not know who they're going to have a chance to get or who they can't get. And so for me, when you're building a team, it is somewhat year to year. You are invested in the development of your players, but opportunity strikes when it does. And I wouldn't rule out completely there's no way we ever make a move if suddenly somebody's available that we never thought would be. And there's no greater example of that than Luka going to the Lakers in the middle of the season. There's no way that you're sitting there thinking that that's going to happen until it does.
Yeah. And it's so not like they were dangling Anthony Davis out to 30 teams.
Right. So that's part of it. So you gotta think in that context for sure. And again, the other thing that we just talked about the Celtics, I did, Tatum and Brown. But look at what they did the whole time those guys were there. Like, they brought in Kyrie. They brought in Porzingis. They brought in Derek White. They brought in Drew Holiday. They've always, those two guys have been together, but they've always been willing to roll the dice on other pieces. They let Marcus Smart go. And it's clear at this point that they got the best there was to get out of Marcus Smart.
But that's the difference for me. Because Boston had to find it. OKC already has it. What they need is different from what Boston needed. And Boston needed a lot more than what OKC needs. Boston needed their entire cast of other role players, of elite role players, championship role players. They had none, really, and they had to get that piece by piece by piece, and then essentially you win a championship. The difference is OKC already has all of those pieces.
See, I look at it differently than you do. I do. I feel like Boston concluded that they had Tatum and Brown.
Yeah.
And despite the whatever was going on outside of that, they knew that was what they had, and they were, to me, essentially fearless in any other guy on that roster to move if they thought they could upgrade.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the opportunities are going to be in off-season for OKC, but I would be equally fearless in moving any particular part of this roster depending on what's available in return.
Yeah,
and
same thing.
But I mean, if it means moving Lou Dort or moving Jalen Williams or whatever, I would be open to it
100%.
if it makes us better. But I do think the Celtics have to be credited for finding that balance between identifying and standing by a core for multiple years while simultaneously being aggressive in rotating the rest of the roster.
100%. I mean, 100%. It's definitely elite front office work.